Welcome back to the season finale of Below the Salt. We are doing Ted Bundy Part 2, where we're going to talk about his time in Florida and his trial. This is Below the Salt. Alrighty, we ready to jump back in?
Yeah, let's dig back into Ted.
Yes. Alrighty. So we're just gonna go ahead and start on August 16th, 1975.
Ooh, okay.
And Ted Bundy was cruising around Granger City, still in Utah, or was that in Colorado? I forget.
Granger City's in Utah. Yep.
Right, I lived there.
You lived in Granger?
No, I went to Granger Elementary.
Yeah, well, you were very nearby.
For a minute.
Yeah.
I forget. I'm old.
Did you forget that you didn't live in Colorado ever?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I just didn't know if there were two cities named the same thing.
This is the Utah Granger, so.
Cool. I just forgot for a second.
It's
Well, anyways, he's cruising around,
What time
and it's super early in the morning.
Okay.
Not dawn yet. Not like midnight, though, so he's not like having a late night.
So it's
He's having an early morning, yeah.
Wow, Ted does that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's a creep.
Yep.
So, creep gotta creep.
This time, Patrol Officer Bob Hayward happened to
Yeah.
see him.
Officer Bob.
He attempted to pull Ted over, but Bundy fled the area, leading him on a high-speed chase.
Whoa. Not suspicious at all to just take off when a cop tries
Not
to
at
pull
all.
over. Yeah.
Also, not suspicious is when you finally do pull over is to have a missing passenger seat
The
and a
seat?
burglary/murder kit in your car.
Hey. Why didn't he have a seat? Like, you feel like a seat would be helpful in kidnapping women.
Right?
Like, because he could, like, sit him down there.
I know.
But, okay. He doesn't have a seat.
Yeah.
He's got a murder bag.
Well, they thought it was just a burglary kit.
Right, which is why they kept him, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Okay.
In this kit, he had a ski mask, a second mask made of pantyhose.
Oh, good.
Which I always thought was the stupidest mask because it's like,
you can still kind of basically,
like the only
unless
thing
it's
that's
dark.
different is like you're a little bit blurry and your nose is squished. That's
Well,
it.
It's dark. It might be enough to
Still, like, why risk it?
It's not a great disguise.
Why
He's
risk
got
it?
a ski mask anyway.
Yeah, like maybe if you're worried about your hair falling out, I guess a pantyhose would work.
that-
But then wear
yeah,
another
that's
mask
true.
on top of it.
Yeah, well, he could do both.
Yeah, do both.
He has both. He might. Maybe
I
he did
know.
both. We wouldn't know.
Yeah, I don't know. He also had a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, a coil of rope, and an ice pick, among other things.
Ice pick freaks me out.
Yeah. Remember, he was an avid skier, and so that is
Okay.
kind of how he
Yeah.
explained away the ski mask.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
he said that he found the handcuffs at a dumpster, and the rest
Some
were
people are just
common
throwing
enough
away.
ends that it shouldn't be weird that he
Where'd
has
you find
them.
the handcuffs, Bundy?
Yeah, right?
A dumpster?
Yeah. Luckily, Detective Jerry Thompson remembered a similar suspect and car description from November of the year before when Ted had attempted to kidnap Carol Durant.
So that had only been like, let's see, 10 months before?
Yeah, about that.
9 months
And also
before.
remember, he used his fucking real name when he tried to kidnap Carol Durant.
No, he said he was Officer Roseland.
Oh,
He
that's
said-
right.
used
He
his
said
real
it
name
in...
in Lake Sammamish.
That's right.
Yep.
But he did match Bundy's name from Cloper's call.
Oh, when Liz called.
When Liz called.
Okay.
Excuse me. I was getting
No, that's cool.
mixed up in my dates.
He got the wrong lady fingering him.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, so this detective was great and finally made a connection, right? Because we're always really frustrated that no police departments talk to each other back then.
Well, and it's a little better now, I think.
A little, maybe. I don't know. I think it is better,
like
but...
stuff like the Amber Alert, like we talked
Yeah.
about in the Rachel
Runyon
episode,
Yes.
is the kind of thing that helps police departments. Funnily enough, we had a little Amber Alert thing happen the other day. At 3:30 in the morning, the emergency, everyone in Utah gets a text every time there's an Amber Alert, right? But this Amber Alert wasn't really helpful because it just said Amber Alert and nothing else. And everyone's like,
yeah, it was super
so you
weird.
woke up everyone at 3
Like,
in the morning
no information.
with zero information. Luckily, the girl was found safe.
Mhm.
Her mother had kidnapped her as a custody thing, which is
Yeah.
often the problem. But Yeah, so they're rethinking how the access and requirements for
sure. Well, it's like
everyone.
There was no information. I don't get it.
Yeah.
There was also another connection made about that time when, upon inspection of his apartment, police found a guide to Colorado ski resorts with a check mark by the Wildwood Inn, which there had just been a murder near, and also a brochure that advertised the Viewmont High School play in Bountiful. Remember, that is where Deborah Kent went missing.
The same day as the Carol Durant kidnapping. Okay.
Yes. Despite this seemingly huge pile of evidence, however, police believed they did not have sufficient evidence to detain Bundy, and he was released on his own.
Well, I mean, I could see how a really good defense attorney would be like, technically that's all circumstantial.
Yeah, but it wasn't even the defense attorney involved either. The police were just like, well, let's just let him go.
I do remember Ted saying something along the lines of, if the police had really looked through his apartment, they would have found a stack of Polaroids.
They sure would have.
Some people think that might have been Ted being like, I'm so much smarter than the police, and like spinning stories.
Yeah.
But that Ted never liked to admit things about his crimes.
No, so why would he make something up about it? I think.
That might have been legit. So
I think it was legit. Yeah. I don't have a doubt in my mind that was legit.
Okay.
Yeah. So even though he was released, they did place him on 24-hour surveillance. Good. Yeah, and remember Detective Thompson? He flew up to Seattle with 2 other detectives to interview Liz. Okay. She told them that the year before Ted had moved to Utah, she discovered objects that she, quote, couldn't understand in her house and in Ted's apartment. These included crutches, surgical gloves, a knife in a wooden case in his glove compartment.
That's weird.
Yeah, definitely.
Not a normal thing.
Yeah, and also, back then, he had a stack of women's clothing, and that was weird.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that doesn't check out. Like, why would he just have that?
Yeah, especially, like I said, back then. It's way more taboo than it is now. Like, whatever, these days, do you.
Sure.
But we know that wasn't why he had it.
Pathology at all.
No.
So she's noticing that he's being a shady sneak.
Yes. Okay. She also was beginning to suspect that he had stolen almost everything that he possessed that was significantly valued.
Okay. So like his TV and stereo. And
stuff.
Okay.
Definitely. She even confronted him on his TV and stereo, actually. And he said, supposedly, if you tell anyone, I'll break your fucking neck.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, which is super scary to me.
That's not a normal
reaction. Like,
don't tell anyone about that. Or, if you tell anyone, I'll break your fucking neck.
Yep.
That's not normal.
Liz also had a few other things to say about Ted, including that he would be very upset when she was considering cutting her hair, which, remember, is long, brown, parted in the middle. She said she would sometimes awaken in the middle of the night to find him under the bed covers with a flashlight looking at her body, or more specifically, examining her body.
Well, I mean, he did have a thing for the dead. They do a really good job of showing that off in the extremely wicked movie with Zac Efron as Ted Bundy. It's really creepy.
He does a good job.
Yeah, he does a phenomenal job. I mean, if you want to look at
it's not a perfect movie.
No.
But I think that was perfect casting.
It's great casting, and it really digs into how Liz is a victim, and how the relationship is just. It takes a few, the liberties, of course they will, but it's. I like that it was more about Liz and Ted's relationship than it was about kind of
just his murders, yeah.
And it was never gruesome.
Yeah.
Like, you never saw a murder.
It wasn't torture porn or anything.
Yeah, it was just kind of his escapes and all the stupid stuff he was up to.
Yep. So back down in Utah, his Volkswagen was impounded, and FBI technicians were able to take it apart and search the whole thing.
Okay.
They ended up finding hair samples that matched Karen Campbell.
From Colorado?
Okay. Melissa Smith.
Okay.
And one Carol Durant.
Hey.
On October 2nd, they put Ted into a lineup, and Durant immediately identified him as Officer Roseland. And witnesses from Bountiful recognized him as the stranger at the high school auditorium as well.
So this is
yes,
enough
there's
to get him.
Finally enough evidence to charge him with aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault, which was for Durange.
For Carol.
Yes.
I heard something funny. Actually, one of our Instagram commenters said something along the lines of, for that lineup, they actually couldn't find a group of
other criminals that looked like him
that were similar-ish to Ted. So they just grabbed a bunch of people nearby, like detectives and like other cops and stuff. And I think it was basically anyone who was white of a certain height is probably what it was.
Yep.
And they shoved them in the room with Ted, and Ted was the only person of any suspicion in the room. And she pointed right at him.
Right at him. Yeah, it was great. He did end up being freed on $15,000 bail, which is so much. And his parents paid that. And I'm not exactly sure was his parents. Was it his grandparents or was it his mom and stepdad?
It might have been his mom and Johnny Culpepper Bundy.
Yeah, I think it said parents. So
it would have said grandparents otherwise.
Yeah. Well, he spent most of the time between indictment and trial in Seattle, where he lived with Liz.
It's ridiculous. Like, they didn't have like ankle monitors back then, so like
no, he could just go out and about, you know.
Well, and Seattle is so close to Canada.
I know. It would be so easy to just get out. Well, just leaving the state, anyways, is like, why is that allowed?
Well, and why is bail only $15,000 in the 70s?
Yeah, it was a lot more than it is, but still.
Yikes.
Yep. Seattle police did not feel they had sufficient evidence to charge him in anything up there, but they did keep him under surveillance.
Well, he didn't have very much evidence at all, except for eyewitness testimony from Lake Sammamish and Liz.
Yep.
They didn't have him actually inflicting harm on anyone else.
Nope.
Ugh, okay.
Yeah. Finally.
I'm glad they were surveilling.
I know, right? Finally, in February of 1976, he stood trial for the attempted kidnapping of Carol Durange.
Oh, technically it was kidnapping.
Yeah, technically, huh?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think it officially was kidnapping.
Good.
Yeah.
That's a bigger charge, actually.
After 4 days of bench trial and a full weekend of deliberation, Judge Stuart Hansen Jr. found him guilty of kidnapping and assault, and he was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in Utah State Prison.
Okay.
In October?
So, hang on. So that was in February.
So 8 months?
8 months later. So he spent a long time in Draper.
A little bit.
Prison. Okay.
Yeah. So in October, he was found hiding in the bushes of the prison yard with an escape kit, which included road maps, airline schedules, and a social security card.
Jeez.
He spent several weeks in solitary confinement, and later that month, Colorado authorities charged him with Karen Campbell's murder.
Good.
Yes,
after... Well, they got the hairs from his car.
Yes, they did. There was a period of resistance, but he did end up waiving extradition proceedings and was transferred to Aspen in January of 1977.
Okay, so the state of Utah got him for sure on kidnapping.
Yes, they
did.
Not
on all the murders that he committed here.
Nope, and then they gave him to Colorado.
Okay.
For some murder charges.
More murder trial.
Yep.
And you can't do a bench trial for murder.
No.
Bench trial is just where they just have a judge it instead of a...
Correct.
A
jury.
A jury,
yeah. So he spent about 6 months there. And on June 7th, 1977, he was transferred to Pitkin County... Well, not transferred. He was transported to Pitkin County Courthouse, in Aspen, for a preliminary hearing. He elected to serve as his own attorney, which is so
egotistic.
So Ted Bundy and so stupid.
Very on brand. Well, it's funny because even if you are an attorney, which Ted is a kind of a gray area on if he's an attorney.
Well, he studied law, but he didn't graduate. He kept dropping out, right?
He wasn't very good at it.
No.
He said himself that all the other law students had something he didn't have. He just couldn't crack it. It's probably
human connection.
Well, I was about to say it's
compassion,
the
empathy.
That law being about human justice, and righting wrongs. And he probably just didn't grasp that concept. He's like, why are we bothering with all these laws? The strong should just prey on the weak all the time. Anyway.
Yeah.
But even if you are a lawyer, you should not represent yourself.
Nope.
Because
it's stupid.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And juries don't like it.
No. Well, and, yeah, I mean, we know lawyers, and none of, like...
We know lots of lawyers.
Yeah, we know a handful of lawyers, and none of them would be stupid enough to ever defend themselves.
Nope.
They know that
and they always say you shouldn't do it.
Yes, exactly. So, anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, because he did act as his own attorney, he wasn't required to wear handcuffs or leg shackles, which I also think is so stupid. Like even if you're representing yourself, you're still the defendant. Exactly. Yeah. Like, you should be required to wear no matter what. I get, like, if you wanted, like, if he otherwise would have been in his prison uniform, I get letting him wear a suit instead, but you still got to be locked up, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, like, there's that whole, like, well, we don't want the jury to automatically assume he's guilty because he's wearing handcuffs.
Well,
but when he's just
at least
around,
leg shackles then.
Well, he's not, like, it's not like he's in front of the jury at this point. He's just like, in preliminary deliberation.
Yep.
Like, he's not, like, pleading his case at all yet. So.
And even if that wasn't, like, a big thing back then, which clearly it wasn't, I hope it is now after what Ted freaking does.
Well, it is for that and other court security things that have come up since, like, well, I'll get into one, but there's a court escape attempt that I want to get into in one of my future episodes.
Cool. So, yeah. Well, anyways, one day during a recess, Ted asked to visit the courthouse law library to research his case. At one point, he ended up being shielded from his guard's view behind a bookcase, and he hurried and opened a window and jumped 2 stories to the ground, where he did injure his right ankle upon landing.
It was a major injury.
Yep. He also took off his outer layer of clothing, so he was wearing a totally different outfit, and just walked through Aspen as roadblocks were being set up, and he hiked up onto the mountains.
And he's gone.
And he's gone.
Can you imagine, like, seeing, like, just, like, walking past the courthouse and some guys...
Just like, no, oh, I know, right? Like, you see some guy fall, you're like...
What the heck?
What?
And then he, like, takes off his clothes and, like, shuffles away.
Yeah.
Limping, I assume.
Yeah.
You're like,
I feel like I'd pay attention to where he went.
Well, there were witnesses that said he went that way. You know,
I would,
but they don't have much
like,
more
do
than
more, you know? Just don't say, like, follow him a little bit. Be like,
wouldn't it be like
he's over here! Like, get in your car and tail him or something.
Ending, right?
Yes, vigilante justice. It's so good. Oh my god, I wish we could do that case, because it's crazy, but
it's so good.
Everybody look up The Night Stalker.
Yeah,
if you haven't already.
How the Night Stalker gets apprehended finally.
It's amazing.
It's so good. I love it. And there's like abuelitas out there just like
wailing on him. So yeah, it's so good.
Oh, chef's kiss ending.
Anyways.
Sorry, moving on.
So Ted's on Aspen Mountain. He ended up breaking into a hunting cabin near the summit, where he stole food, clothes, and a rifle.
Oh, good. Now he's armed.
Yes.
Excellent.
The next day, he left the cabin and continued south toward the town of Crested Butte, but became lost in the forest.
It's a funny name, Crested Butte. I bet there's really nice people there. But you got a
so
silly name for
stupid.
your town. I'm just saying.
Because it looks like butt.
Well, and it's crested. It's like drawing attention to it.
So silly.
Yeah.
Well, he became lost in the forest.
Typical Ted move. You know, if Ted was like a tiny
he really is not smart.
In like a couple ways, he totally would have gotten away with so much. If he was a better driver, he wouldn't have gotten pulled over by Officer Bob and Granger. If he'd like not gotten lost in the woods, he probably would have been able to escape at this point.
Yep, he ended up being lost in the woods for 2 days.
Yeah, just walk it down
and he apparently was close to trails that would have led him where he wanted to go, and he just kept missing them.
So unlucky and dumb.
Yep.
Cool.
On June 10th, he finally found a camping trailer on Maroon Lake.
So he's been wandering out.
Yeah, which is about 10 miles south of Aspen.
Oh man.
Yeah. He broke into a camping trailer and he took some food and a ski parka. But instead of continuing southward, he walked back north up to Aspen, where he eluded roadblocks and search parties that were still searching for him. And like, I really feel like with Ted, he must have just been lucky for some sometime, because the fact that he first just got lost, couldn't find out where he was going, but then on his way back, didn't get caught.
I think I know the big cosmic reason why he doesn't get caught right here.
Tell me.
Okay, so, his case in Aspen was not very. This case against Ted wasn't very strong.
So he got to go on and commit worse crimes, but then get a worse sentence.
Because, well, and like nothing screams guilty like escaping from the courthouse. So. But
he could have been caught here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He could. Well, he was caught here. But like, it's like if he had just focused on his case, let his lawyers work for him, not tried to escape all the time, he probably could have gotten away with Karen Campbell's murder. But he kept trying to escape. He kept trying to act as his own attorney, and all this cosmic bullshit is going to bite him in the ass. Unfortunately, it's not before his next escape.
No, yeah, he should have been caught right here. It's just ridiculous.
He should have just been put away
for
the Seattle crimes.
For sure.
He exploited the holes in the law enforcement system. Anyway.
Yep. Anyways, 3 days after that, he stole a car at the edge of Aspen Golf Course. He was, he was not doing so hot.
Yeah, well, he
hadn't been sleeping. He has a sprained ankle. He's been freezing. And he was... Yeah.
Sorry.
He drove back into Aspen, where he was a horrible driver again, and 2 police officers noticed him weaving in and out of the lane and pulled him over. Yeah.
Oh,
in his car, he had maps of Aspen, and they say that indicated his escape was not spontaneous, but had in fact been planned.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't just in the library and was like, oh shit, nobody's looking at me, and jumped out the window. And he had specifically asked to go to the library.
And he got that map intentionally, but he got it as part of the Karen Campbell case.
Yep.
So messed up. So they know that he's a skeevy up to no good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So these cops finally are able to bring him back to jail in Glenwood Springs.
He just keeps, he's just a slippery bastard. I hate this guy. Okay.
So, he's back in jail in Glenwood Springs.
That's where he belongs.
Yes, it is. Well, the case against him was still pretty weak, which, after everything that's happened, I don't get how that's a weak case, but okay.
It seems pretty strong to me, but whatever.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it just kept deteriorating, and pre-trial motions were being resolved in his favor, and big bits of evidence were ruled inadmissible.
Well, so, his lawyers must be pretty good or something. Right? Anyway.
Yeah.
Why isn't he listening to him? Is what I want to know.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. There's a quote that says, a more rational defendant might have realized that he stood a good chance of acquittal, and that beating the murder charge in Colorado would probably have dissuaded other prosecutors with as little as 1.5 years remaining to serve on the DeRange conviction.
He was going to get out in 1.5 years anyway? Oh.
Had Ted persevered, he could have been a free man.
So if he just stuck with the case, he would have just been off.
Yep.
And the other investigations wouldn't have gone anywhere.
Yep. But because he's a big dumbass, he decided to escape again.
Well, it's just dude, just be just chill for a sec.
I know,
be out.
Right?
Maybe
he just was stupid and hated being in jail, I bet.
Just the walls were closing in, and he thought that the Seattle cops might be after
Maybe,
him.
But again, if he wasn't stupid, he would have realized what was happening anyways.
Yeah, well, we know he is stupid.
Yep.
So there you go.
So somehow he acquired a detailed floor plan of the jail and a hacksaw blade from other inmates, which is horrifying. He also got $500 in cash.
Whoa. Well, and that's 77 money?
Yeah.
You could go see Star Wars in theaters a lot of times.
I know. Go buy a Star Wars.
Go see a Star Wars.
And this was a very prolonged plan. He accumulated all that stuff in about 6 months. Whoa, so he was prepping for it for a long time.
Yeah. This is a long haul.
And one of the persons that helped him get some money, Carol Ann Boone.
Oh, that salamander.
Bitch.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
dumbass bitch.
Yeah, she's drinking the dumb bitch juice pretty heavily over there.
Yeah, is she still alive or is she dead?
I think she's still alive. She's very old, though.
Well, maybe we shouldn't say that.
Well, no, she is kind of... I mean...
Just leave it in there.
Okay.
It's fine.
Alright, we're keeping it in. Take that, girl, Anthony.
During the evenings, when other prisoners were showering or otherwise distracted, Ted would saw a hole about 1 square foot between the steel reinforcing bars in his cell ceiling.
Okay, so he's just like doing old-fashioned.
Well, he worked on the hole that ended up being about a square foot.
Right, but like he's literally sawing a hole in the wall to escape. Like it's escape from Alcatraz or some shit.
Yep, he wanted to wriggle up into the crawl space, and he could because he also lost 35 pounds.
Oh, God.
Yep.
I wish I could lose 35 pounds.
So do I.
I don't have the motivation that Ted has. I think.
No.
Like, oh, I'm gonna probably get the electric chair if the Seattle guys find out what's going on. So. Yeah,
definitely not. So he made a couple practice runs, exploring the space so that he knew exactly where to go. And there were multiple.
I mean, there's a kind of a smart element of that, like doing practice runs, because like so many escape attempts go wrong because they like get halfway through something, and they're like, oh. That didn't work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Several inmates reported movement within the ceiling during the night, but of course it was never investigated.
Well, and you could see how like some crazy inmate comes up to you and like, I'm hearing stuff in the ceiling.
Exactly.
They're like, okay, Heroin Bob, whatever you say, you know.
Yep. On the night of December 30th, with most of the jail staff on Christmas break still and, you know, getting ready for New Year's, some of the non-violent prisoners were on furlough with their families.
That's nice.
So it was pretty empty. Pretty empty in the jail. Right? So Ted, of course, piled up some books, some files.
Like it's a Hardy Boys book.
Yep, put them in his bed and covered them with a blanket to simulate his sleeping body. He then climbed up into the crawl space and broke through the ceiling into the apartment of the chief jailer, aka warden.
Well, the warden of a jail, I think, is called the chief jailer.
Yeah, it's the equivalent for this situation.
Are long term, so they're wardens, but jails are short term.
Yeah,
so they're jailers.
Yeah,
I guess.
But that's what it is.
Kind of a cool, like it feels old timey.
A little bit.
Like a sheriff should have.
A little bit.
Yeah,
but that's what it is. Okay. It's the guy who's in charge.
Yeah, it's the head. Yeah,
Yeah. Who was also not there, you know. I don't know if Ted knew he wasn't going to be there that night.
Well, he probably hoped so.
Yeah, or just was hoping, whatever. So he's in the jailer's office. He changed into some of the jailer's street clothes that were waiting in the closet.
I guess, do people just keep their clothes at work? I guess.
Yeah, I know even like, there's some places, like, we've been watching a show about a zoo where they're not allowed to wear their uniforms unless they're at work, you know, like they're not allowed to commute in their uniform for whatever reason, so maybe that's like a thing too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or he probably just has extra outfits, you know, like I imagine working at the jail could be a little bit messy or sweaty.
A prison guard doesn't want to be in their prison guard uniform all the time.
Exactly.
Like, they have to stop at the grocery store.
And especially the jailer, I imagine that he has a lot of meetings going on.
Oh, true.
So he might have to actually wear a suit all day, and then when he's done with meetings, he might want to be a little more comfortable.
Well, Ted was really lucky that his clothes fit, at least well enough to get out the door.
Yeah, because that is exactly what he did. He just walked right out the front door to his freedom. He then stole a car and drove out of Glenwood Springs. The car ended up breaking down on Interstate 70. But a passing motorist gave him a ride into Vail, and from there he got on the bus to Denver.
I heard a little bit about this little car ride he took with this random fellow. It was snowing like crazy.
I believe
and he
it.
was stuck on the side of the road, car broken down. Some nice guy pulls over, says, "Hey, you need a hand?" He's like, "Yeah, can you take me to Denver?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just going to Vail." He's like, "Okay." So he just some nice normal guy, and they're just like having a nice normal conversation.
Yeah, that would be crazy to realize later.
Prisoner,
yep.
Murderer.
Ted Bundy. Yeah, like finding that out later.
Yeah, you
would be crazy.
That would mess you up.
Yep. From Denver, he got a morning flight to Chicago.
Well, he's got all that money.
Yes, he does.
And apparently you can just buy plane tickets with cash.
Oh, back then.
And no ID. It's crazy to think about now because you have to have, like...
We live in a post 9/11 world.
We do live in a post 9/11 world. You need, like, a letter from the President of the United States to, like, fucking fly to, you know, Las Vegas from Salt Lake City. Jesus. Anyway,
yeah.
Sorry.
So by
And
the
it's all
time,
stupid anyway.
yeah, by the time people the next morning realize he's left, he'd already arrived in Chicago.
What?
Yeah.
So
he wasn't even
overnight,
still in transit. He just was there already, and nobody had noticed.
He's like 8 states and 1,000 miles away.
Yep.
Jesus Christ. Holy cow. That is insane.
Yep.
That is like one of the most successful prison breaks I've ever heard of. You know, because usually it's like, we got a prison break and there's like some doofus running across a field at 4 a.m. And they're, you know, but he's got street clothes, he's got money, he got a ride into Denver and flew all the way to Chicago. Like,
yeah, it's crazy.
Just insane. And I feel like that would be more possible in the 70s, obviously.
Oh, for sure.
But like,
for sure. Even just hitchhiking was easier back then, you know, like.
And jails are just. I think jails are a lot more locked down these days. I feel like the chief jailer wouldn't even be in the same building as the cell blocks.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on the jail, but yeah.
True. And this is probably not the biggest jail.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, after he got to Chicago, he traveled by train to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I don't know why he went further north. I think he was planning on going south, but whatever. He was in a local bar on January 2nd, 1978, to see his alma mater, University of Washington, win the Rose Bowl. Hey,
that's so dumb.
It's a nice little moment in Ted's.
What's the quote from the episode of Simpsons you watched last night about football?
Oh,
it's like
the long road to the Super Bowl.
The road to the Super Bowl is long and pointless.
Yeah, it was great. It's just a little dig on
sports.
On how weird sports are sometimes.
Yeah,
it was great. He stole a car.
Again.
In Ann Arbor. He's really good at stealing cars. He's been stealing cars since
he's good at stealing them, but not good at driving them.
I know, right? Like, you know what? I bet he stole a Volkswagen Beetle when he was in Ann Arbor. I bet. I would put money on it. But we don't know, because he drove it all the way to Atlanta and abandoned it somewhere.
Wow, in Atlanta? That was like his best luck of driving.
What?
Biggest
because he made it
stretch.
all the way to Atlanta without getting pulled over and arrested?
Yep.
He probably did get pulled over, he just didn't get arrested.
Yeah, I guess so, because he didn't have any of his stuff with him.
He didn't have his murder kit.
Yeah.
What a doofus. Then in Atlanta, he boarded a bus and took the bus to Tallahassee, Florida.
Cool.
He arrived there on January 8th. So he's only been gone a week and
change,
9 days.
Yeah.
Bundy said later to investigators that he was committed to finding a good job and leaving his life of crime behind.
Right.
And avoiding a likely lifetime prison sentence.
Okay.
However, when he arrived in Tallahassee on January 8th, he rented a room at a Holiday Inn right next to Florida State University, a location that would serve very well as a source of prey.
Lots of co-eds.
And it's like he's going back to his roots.
It's like, you're not even trying, Ted.
No, he wasn't trying. He said he was trying. He's like, oh, I'm trying to turn my life around. No, you're not. You intentionally landed somewhere. He was chomping at the bit to go out and have another murder spree.
That is a visceral description, since I know what he does. I hate it. God, my...
Is your stomach okay?
Yes, okay. It's other parts of me that are not.
Oh, yikes. Okay. Well, he's such a piece of shit. Like he's been in prison for, let's see, he left in a little over a year.
It's like technically 2 years.
Yeah, so it's a little under 2 years.
Yeah.
And the first thing he wants to do is to go and just murder.
Go ham.
Well, and the psychologist said, his murders are his life accomplishments. That's what he loves. He loves that he murdered people.
It's like his purpose.
Yeah, because he loved possessing
things. And he hasn't been able to do that for a really long time.
Yes, so he's jonesing.
I mean, I get jonesing, just not for murder.
Yeah, you just jones for iced chai.
Yeah, from Starbucks. It's my lifeblood. My blood is like 50% chai, 50% tomato sauce.
Marinara.
Yeah.
I couldn't say what mine is. Probably like hamburger grease and
Mountain Dew, which is gross and I hate it.
That sounds awful.
It is.
I need to think about my life for a minute. Okay. He did apply for one job at a construction site, but he had to take off when they asked to see his ID.
Dummy.
Because of course. So eventually, to pay for his hotel room and for food and whatnot, he would shoplift and steal credit cards. And with those old habits came his other old habit.
Mm-hmm.
In the very early hours of January 15th, 1978, and content warning to everyone out there.
This is what I was talking about.
This
it's
is
rough.
Probably the most fucked up thing that Ted does. I mean,
well, as far as gruesomeness goes, like, he did kill a 12-year-old, which is horrible.
He's gonna kill another 12-year-old.
Yeah. I would say that's a little more horrible. Well, but this one is, it's like, I'm sorry, I have the hiccups.
The most
physically brutal.
Killer. This is like Halloween the movie.
Yeah. It's like, way worse than Halloween the movie. Like, Michael Myers just stabs you and then he's done. Like,
true. Okay, well, let's
just go
into this.
Oh, okay.
Just prepare yourselves. Bundy entered Florida State University's Chi Omega sorority house through a rear door with a bad lock, and he began a rampage. It's the best way you can describe what he did. A lot of people think he'd been casing the area for some time. A lot of people had seen him around, and he'd found the door with the bad lock and figured out what he wanted to do. Starting at 2:45 a.m., on his way in, he actually grabbed a piece of oak fire.
Because he did that a lot, right? He would grab stuff that was around him.
When he didn't have his murder kit, that's what he would do. He would grab whatever they had handy. Like his first few kills. And actually, a lot about this rampage is a lot like his first few kills.
Including the sloppiness.
The sloppiness and the invasion. Like, he'd just bust into the house.
Yep.
And he would use a found weapon. So, starting at 2:45, he bludgeoned Margaret Bowman, who was 21 years old. Of course, a college student. With the piece of wood. And then garroted her with a nylon stocking. And killed
Jesus.
her. There's a lot of details here that I'm just gonna kind of skip. It was a really very brutal way to go. He then entered the bedroom of 20-year-old Lisa Levy and beat her unconscious. He tore one of her nipples. Off.
He didn't just cut her.
Hanging on by a little.
Oh my God.
He bit deeply into her left buttock. He sexually assaulted her with a hair mist bottle, like a hairspray bottle, and then fatally strangled her with his bare hands. In an adjoining bedroom, he attacked and brutally beat Kathy Kleiner, breaking her jaw. She did. Lisa Levy did die. Kathy Kleiner, however, did not die. He beat her, broke her jaw, and deeply lacerated her shoulder.
With what?
Actually, which is kind of more terrifying than knowing what it was. In that same room was also Karen Chandler, who he also beat. She suffered a concussion, a broken jaw, a loss of teeth, and a crushed finger. Both Chandler and Kleiner survived the attack in their room.
That's so horrifying.
They attribute their survival to the fact that car headlights happened to pass through their room and scared Ted away. Because he didn't want witnesses. Yeah.
I'm not going to speculate on how both of them survived, for so long. I wonder if he was going back and forth between them and doing that, or beating them at the same time. I don't know. I don't want to speculate on it too much, but...
Well, from what the detectives put together, he went room to room.
Well, but they were in the same room.
Between
so, once he started on one girl, did he just, do it so fast and then move on to the next girl and go? Or do you think he switched back and forth to keep both of them from, running away or screaming or something? I don't know.
Impossible to say because both of them had such bad head injuries.
And they both survived, though, which is lucky.
They survived,
I feel like he probably just smacked them both really fast and then did... Yeah. Anyways, okay.
Yeah. Detectives determined. So he takes off. Obviously, they called the police. The detectives arrived and determined that the 4 attacks all happened in less than 15 minutes, and within earshot of more than 30 witnesses who heard nothing.
Yeah, that's so scary that nobody heard anything.
He got them while they were sleeping.
I know, but even minus
Each
screams and a struggle, just what he was doing to them.
Yeah.
I can't believe it doesn't make more noise, like beating a person to death.
Well, and just being able to, and choking them to death.
Yeah.
Because, like, it takes a minute.
So he must have been going so crazy, because I don't know if we've talked about on this podcast before, but we've talked about it together. Mm-hmm. Strangling someone takes a while, like longer than you expect. Yeah, so he must have just been going so crazy, and then just everything that he did to her before probably just exacerbated it and made it happen quicker. But oh my good Lord, like, Jesus Christ.
Just to be able to attack 4 people in that amount of time is, like, not only is it, like, obviously pure, like, animalistic rage, but it's, like, so, like, bold.
Yeah.
Like, he has the balls to actually attack 4 people. Like, he wasn't just satisfied with, like, murdering and snuffing out an entire human life. He was gonna go room to room and get every single one he possibly could.
Yeah, and like you were just saying, he probably would have done more than 4 if the headlights hadn't gone by.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely would have killed.
And more would have died.
Kleiner,
yeah.
For sure. And one of the scarier things about this rampage is that he doesn't just stop after one house.
Nope.
After ending 2 lives and permanently damaging 2 more lives, he wasn't done. He leaves the sorority house and he breaks into a basement apartment 8 blocks away and attacks FSU student Cheryl Thomas, dislocating her shoulder, fracturing her jaw and her skull in 5 places, just beating her absolutely senseless. She was left with permanent deafness in one ear and equilibrium damage that ended her dance career. She was in school on a dance scholarship. On her bed, police found a semen stain and a pantyhose mask containing 2 hairs that were similar to Bundy's in class and characteristic. As far
That's so gross.
You can really surmise this is one of the first instances of physical evidence being left by Ted at a single crime scene.
That's so gross.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. However, the fact that there was physical evidence at the scene didn't help the police track down Ted Bundy in Florida. It was 3 weeks later.
Jesus.
That Ted drove east to Jacksonville in a stolen Florida State University van, which that's pretty typical for Florida. You got a serial killer, stolen van. If you could add something about crystal meth, it might actually be the perfect sentence about Florida. Anyway, in a parking lot, he approached 14-year-old Leslie Parmenter. She was the daughter of Jacksonville's chief of police.
How does he keep finding the daughters of the chiefs?
Do they have big signs on them? I don't know.
That's crazy.
It just tells me that there's so much weird luck on Ted's side. I don't know. Or bad luck. I don't know. There's just so many strange things about this case. He identified himself as Richard Burton, Fire Department. But retreated when Parmenter's older brother arrived and asked who he was. He just took off. Very suspicious if someone asked, "Hey, who are you?" and then take off. They're up to no good. He then backtracked 60 miles west, back towards Tallahassee to Lake City. The next morning at Lake City Junior High School, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach was summoned to her homeroom by a teacher to retrieve a forgotten purse.
Poor girl.
Never returned to class.
Never.
Nope.
Was seen again, even.
7 weeks later, after an intensive search, her partially mummified remains were found in a pig farrowing shed 35 miles northwest of Lake City. She'd been sexually assaulted and killed by knife wounds to the neck. Kimberly Leach was Ted Bundy's final murder victim.
That's so horrible. Yeah, Florida is definitely the worst time. Florida man, he just went... It must be something in the water. Right?
There's the whole idea that there's this law in Florida called the Sunshine Law, where the police have to publicize the events of crimes. So it's less about the fact that Florida has crazy crimes, which they definitely do, but more about the fact that all of them get publicized. Mm-hmm. So, is it cause or effect?
Both.
It's probably both.
Just like the fact that he even just went so crazy once he was down in Florida
absolutely
is
unbelievable.
A funny conspiracy theory to me about Florida, but no, it's horrible, and
like
he's
Florida
a
attracted him.
horrible person, and yeah.
So, he went back to Florida, or to Tallahassee, on February 12th, so that's just a few days later. Let me see. Sorry, how many days later? Just a few days later. He had no money to pay his overdue rent, and he had a sense that the police were closing in on him.
Mm-hmm.
So he stole another car, and he fled Tallahassee. He drove west across the Panhandle. 3 days later, at 1 in the morning, he was stopped by Pensacola police officer David Lee near the Alabama state line. He was
fucking again.
He almost made it out of Florida. If he'd made it out of Florida, that's a whole nother jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm. Where he hadn't done anything yet.
Yeah, never would have caught him.
Yep.
Well, they might have caught him for being one of the FBI's most wanted.
Yeah.
And an escapee.
Or another rampage.
But probably not for the Florida murders at all.
Nope.
He almost made it out. His Volkswagen Beetle was flagged as stolen.
Mm-hmm.
He just had to stick with those Beetles, man. So dumb. So when Ted was told he was under arrest, he kicked Officer Lee's feet out from under him and just bolted.
Booked it.
Yep. Officer Lee fired a warning shot at Ted. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And
just straight up into the air or at Ted?
Actually at Ted.
So was it a warning shot or is he a bad aimer?
Well, Lee said it was a warning shot. That's all we know. And then Ted fell to the ground. Mm-hmm. Acting dead and hit by the bullet.
Mm-hmm.
So, Officer Lee runs up to him, of course, and when he gets there, Ted jumps on him and tries to get the gun out of his hands. They struggle over the gun for apparently a few minutes. It was like 2 or 3 minutes.
Wow, that's a long fight.
Yeah. And before the officer finally managed to pull his gun away from Ted and place him under arrest and put the cuffs on him.
Nice.
In the stolen Beetle, there were 3 sets of IDs belonging to female FSU students, 21 stolen credit cards, and a stolen TV.
Jesus.
As Officer Lee drove Ted to jail, he was unaware that he had just arrested one of the 10 most wanted, and he heard Ted say in the backseat, "I wish you had killed me."
Oh.
Whew. So.
Brutal.
You ready for a murder trial?
Yes, I am.
Let's do this. Okay. During his indictment, Ted Bundy made a big show about how all of it was such a big sham, and he was just, he was getting all these extra charges added onto him just because he'd escaped from prison. Mm-hmm. He was just being set up. He would denigrate Leon County Sheriff Ken Katsaris during an impromptu press conference at the jail. He was like, "Oh, what do we have here, Ken? Oh, it looks like we have an indictment. Why don't you read it to me? You're up for election, aren't you?" Oh, he's such an asshole to like everyone.
Huge dick.
Yeah. He's like, you told him you were gonna get me, and he'd gesture at the cameras, and he's like, "Oh, okay, so you got your indictment. That's all you're gonna get. Let's read it. Let's go." Like he's just putting on this huge show for the press.
Wow.
And he actually says that. Ken starts reading off the charges: not imprisonment, kidnapping, assault, murder. And as he's reading these remarks, Ted says, "This is my chance to speak to the press. I'll plead not guilty right now." Mm-hmm. But Sheriff Ken got the last laugh. He later told Ted the following line, and I'm not sure if this is like some screenwriter somewhere that wrote this line or if Ken just said it, but I love it so much I'm going to say it. It's great. He said, "Washington missed you, Utah gave you away, and Colorado lost you, but Florida is going to fry you."
Damn.
Love it. Mm-hmm. Love it. Love Officer Ken.
Yeah, that's great.
That's some movie shit. In June 1979, Ted Bundy stood trial for the Cuyahoga homicides and assaults in Miami. The trial was covered by 250 reporters from 5 continents. Ooh. And was the first to be televised nationally in the United States. Hey, nice. Court TV coming at you. Despite the presence of 5 court-appointed attorneys, Ted again handled much of his own defense. According to his attorneys, Ted sabotaged the entire defense out of spite, distrust, and grandiose delusion.
Sounds like him.
Right on the money, right on the numbers for Ted. He was facing murder charges with a possible death sentence, and all that mattered to him...
A death sentence?
Yeah, did I not say death sentence?
Nope.
I kind of stumbled through the word.
Yep.
And all that mattered to him was to be in charge. That's a quote from his attorney.
I believe it.
Yep. At trial, Chi Omega sorority member Connie Hastings placed Bundy in the vicinity of the Chi Omega house that evening. Fellow Chi Omega member Anita Neary also placed him leaving the sorority house with the oak log murder weapon.
Oh, damn.
Physical evidence, which the oak log actually was found and put into evidence. Physical evidence also included impressions of the bite wounds Bundy had inflicted on Lisa Levy's left buttock.
Ouch.
Which forensic odontologists matched castings of Bundy's teeth. The jury deliberated for less than 7 hours before convicting him on July 24th, 1979.
Excellent.
Trial judge Edward Coward imposed death sentences for the murder convictions and expressed a regret at the loss of life of both victims and for Ted himself, who he said could have practiced law in a very similar courtroom somewhere had Ted not become an evil monster.
So I actually hate that clip from the trial.
Yep.
When the judge tells him, he's like, oh, you're really charismatic, and if you had just gone through like the normal route,
different way,
you went a different way, then I would be proud to have you practice in my courtroom. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, one, you should not feel that way. He's a monster, and also he was a big fucking idiot. Everybody else says so. He was not a good lawyer. Yes. And, like, even if you feel that way, don't say it after you've just sentenced this man to death for these horrible crimes.
So I think many judges have kind of a power thing. But think about this: if a black serial killer had been in there and represented himself, no way in hell that judge says that.
Nope. And
that judge treats him like an animal.
I don't know exactly about judges having a power thing, because some judges definitely do, but we know a few judges too.
And they were great.
Yeah. So but I don't know.
This guy always put off that sense for me. He's actually played by John Malkovich in the movie.
Yeah.
And he looks nothing like John Malkovich. He's about 250 pounds heavier for one thing. But it's
that always makes my skin crawl. I was gonna say it makes my skin crawl more than anything that Ted says. Like, Ted will give me the chills, and of course he's a monster too, but it's like,
you expect that from a monster.
Exactly.
But from someone who's supposed to be representing the law, it's
yeah, I hate it.
Yeah. 6 months later, a second trial took place in Orlando. Notice they didn't do either of these trials in Tallahassee or Lake City because, press. Second trial took place in Orlando for the murder of Kimberly Leach, 12 years old. Bundy was found guilty once again after less than 8 hours of deliberation due to eyewitness testimony and material fiber evidence matching the stolen FSU van, Leach's body, and Ted's arrest jacket. During the penalty phase of the trial, Bundy took advantage of an obscure Florida law saying that a marriage declaration in court in the presence of a judge constituted a legal marriage. As he was questioning his former Washington State DES co-worker Carol Ann Boone, who had actually moved to Florida to be closer to Ted, she was there to testify on his behalf during both trials as a character witness. He asked Carol to marry him. She accepted, and Ted declared to the court that they were now legally married.
And they were, and
yes,
that's
they were.
So stupid.
Yeah, I'm sure they changed that law pretty quick afterward. On February 10th, 1980, Bundy was sentenced for a third time to death by electrocution.
Good.
As the sentence was announced, he reportedly stood and shouted, "Tell the jury they were wrong!"
Yeah, is that the famous picture of him when he gets up and yells? And it's so scary.
And apparently, a lot of people said this is the first time Ted has ever shown what he was like with his victims.
That's the real Ted.
That's the real Ted. Everyone finally got to see a little bit of the monster that's hiding under Ted's skin. This third death sentence is actually the one that was carried out 9 years later.
Okay.
In October 1981, Carol Ann Boone gave birth to a daughter.
Ew, I hate that they had a conjugal visit.
Bundy as the father.
Ugh.
Conjugal visits aren't allowed at Ryford Prison, where he was kept, but inmates were known to pool their money in order to bribe guards and allow them intimate time alone with their female visitors.
Dude, if I ever went to prison, there's no way I would give anybody my money so that they could go have a conjugal visit. Like,
no.
No.
I think it wasn't multiple inmates pooling for Ted.
Yeah, but like just a general thing, I still would not contribute to that.
I don't think that was happening.
That's so stupid.
So, Florida did actually keep their promise to fry Ted, which is just fantastic.
Good.
Yep. Shortly after the conclusion of the Leach trial and the beginning of the long appeals process that followed, Bundy initiated a series of interviews with Stephen Michaud and Hugh Ainsworth. When they first started the interviews, Ted refused to admit that he had committed the crimes, which, of course, stonewalled the investigators who were there to just get some information for the victims' families.
Mm-hmm.
But he just like, I didn't do it. Like, this is, the whole thing is a big sham. Yeah, right, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
In a rather genius move, the investigators came up with a strategy. Instead of asking about Ted's murders, they would ask him about what the real killer would have done, and possibly gain important new details that could give closure to families and further criminological interests. Luckily, Ted considered him an expert on both psychology — he did get a psych undergrad degree — and the activities of the quote-unquote real killer. And for the first time, he began to divulge details of his crimes and thought processes. Oh, it's so
stupid.
So smart of him to just appeal to his ego. Be like, oh, well, Ted, you know all about the real killer. Tell us more.
Yeah,
and he totally falls for it.
I know.
But it's so smart of them to come up with that.
I know.
Right? Like,
it really, like, he is so stupid. I can't even believe it.
People try to give him so much credit for being smart, but, like,
he's so not.
Being able to exploit the very obvious loopholes in the law enforcement apparatus in the 70s, not hard. You know?
Yeah. So, and I really think, like, he just was lucky for a bit. He had some luck, you know.
Well, yeah, he lucked out in the earliest phase, and that's all it really took. He just kept doing what he did.
Yep.
So in the process of the interviews, Ted recounted and took credit for his career as a thief. He admitted he was actually a thief when he was a kid, which confirmed Liz's longtime suspicion that he had shoplifted virtually everything of substance that he owned.
Right.
The big payoff for me, he would say, was actually possessing whatever I had stolen. I really enjoyed having something that I had wanted and had gone out and taken.
Yeah.
Possession proved to be an important motive for his rape and murder crimes as well. Sexual assault, he said, fulfilled his need to totally possess his victims. At first, he killed his victims as a matter of expediency to eliminate the possibility of being caught. See how he talks like he thinks he's like the hottest shit? But later, murder became part of the quote-unquote adventure.
Ew.
The ultimate possession was, in fact, the taking of the life, he said, and then the physical possession of the remains. And we know what that means.
Yep.
Ted has a really irritating habit of speaking like he was much more intelligent than he actually was, with a big mess of fancy words that could be expressed in a much simpler way. This is something that kind of speaks to his antisocial personality.
Definitely.
Ted was the opposite of a model prisoner, as you might imagine. Even in the last stage of his incarceration, when he's on death row, he has nothing to gain by escaping. In July 1984, guards found 2 hacksaw blades that Bundy had hidden in his cell. A steel bar in one of the cell's windows had been completely sawed through at the top and the bottom and was glued back into place with a homemade soap-based adhesive.
That's crazy.
So, he might not be smart, but he is determined as hell.
And he's resourceful.
Yeah,
he is that.
That's different from being smart.
Yeah.
Several months later, guards found an unauthorized mirror hidden in his cell. And Ted was again moved to a different
so that he could look at himself and his feet.
Yeah, he loved looking at himself. Did we talk about that in the last episode? Oh,
he loved his feet.
Disgusting. He's just like, oh, my feet are so fucking sexy. Gross. Oh man. Okay. So again, he was moved to a different cell. Shortly thereafter, he got in trouble for corresponding with another high-profile criminal, John Hinckley Jr.
Mm-hmm.
You know John Hinckley
Yeah,
Jr.?
didn't he try to kill or assassinate Reagan?
Yes, he did.
Because he wanted to impress my favorite, Jodie Foster.
Yeah, he did try to impress Jodie Foster.
I mean, I want to impress her too, but...
But that's the wrong way to go, man.
Yeah.
But he thought Taxi Driver was like real life or something.
Mm-hmm.
And in Taxi Driver, Robert De Niro's character tries to assassinate a political figure to impress someone, and his brain got all mixed up. He actually never served time, John Hinckley Jr. He was in institutes for the rest of his life. He actually didn't. Well, for many years he hadn't killed someone. He shot James Brady, who was President Reagan's press secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he did injure a Secret Service member.
Wow.
And he shot Reagan, and Reagan almost died.
Yeah.
But Brady didn't die until like 30 years later. But it was attributed to his injuries.
Wow.
Yeah. But he was actually recently released from his institution.
Jeez.
Because he's no longer insane.
Okay.
But he's being very closely watched. But yeah, he because he was very much not sane. He did not understand the consequences of his actions.
Yeah.
So, but Ted was chatting with him in his institution, which is weird. Is there like a super famous criminal like letter service where they like can all talk
You can
to
just
each other?
write to them
I guess
when you
so.
know what if you know what prison they're at. You can just write to them.
But they're not supposed to, and he got in trouble.
But you just can't.
Okay.
Yeah, like you know, if I was just a little bit crazier, I would totally be writing to some of these guys just to be like, "What is wrong with you?"
I think you'd have to be a lot crazier. I give you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I would never do that right now, but
I
would be curious to see what they had to say. I just wouldn't want to say anything to them.
Yeah, for real. So you know how Ted is like the total expert on the real killer?
Mm-hmm.
Well, since he's such an expert, he reached out to the FBI's Robert Keppel in October 1984 and offered to share his expertise in serial killer psychology in the ongoing hunt in Washington State, his old kind of hometown, for the Green River Killer in the Pacific Northwest, who was later identified as Gary Ridgway. So Robert Keppel went down there because he thought, I mean, if I was in the FBI's behavioral sciences unit and I got a letter
any
from
chance
Ted
to talk to this guy.
Well, and like, hey, maybe he would have something.
Yeah.
Remember, so the task force sent Dave Reichert to Bundy in Florida. Remember, Ted, of course, still had not confessed to the killings at this point, but he did consider himself an expert because he'd been trying to catch that real killer, and he had so much insight about the killer's process. He told investigators to stake out dumping sites they found, since it was likely that the killer would return to relive the experience. Which is funny, because that's what Ted did all the time. But since Ridgway's M.O. did not require a post-mortem ritual, like Bundy, who was a product killer,
and Ridgway was a process killer. Right.
He liked
the process of murdering. Yeah, he didn't care about the bodies after.
He just dumped them in the river, which is why he's the Green River Killer.
Yeah.
So Ted's helpful advice was not super helpful. And possible stakeouts didn't help authorities capture Ridgway. He remained at large for another 17 years.
Wow.
But it did somewhat inspire Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, I love that movie so much. And the book. The book's so good.
The book is also good. The idea of interviewing one serial killer to gain insight on another is kind of what it was part of the genesis of Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, but that's so cool though, because Red Dragon was before that, and they still did that a little bit.
Yep.
So good for Robert Harris or Thomas Harris. Sorry, is there Robert Harris? I feel like I always say that when I mean Thomas.
I don't know Robert Harris.
Anyways, those books are really good. Read them. I've read them.
They are good. In April 1986, shortly after his final execution date was announced, Bundy finally confessed to investigators what they believed was the full range of his sickening actions, including details of what he did to some victims after their deaths.
Gross.
He confessed to Keppel that he had committed all 8 of the Washington and Oregon homicides for which he was the prime suspect. He described 3 additional previously unknown victims in Washington and 2 more in Oregon whom he declined to identify.
Do you think he was doing that just to be a dick, or because he actually cared about something, or do you think he didn't care at all and just didn't even know their names?
Oh, the reason why he didn't know?
Yeah.
It was part of his Bones for Time scheme.
Okay.
He was doing it
So he's being a dick because he wanted to leverage it for an extension on his execution.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so he could live longer because he's a coward.
Yes. A long-term, Keppel wrote that a long-term serial killer erects powerful barriers to his own guilt. Walls of denial that can sometimes never be breached even by the killer.
Mm-hmm.
Each time he was forced to make an actual confession, he had to leap a steep barrier he had built inside himself a long time ago. Ted's ulterior strategy for these confessions soon became apparent. He intentionally withheld many details, hoping to parlay the incomplete information into yet another stay of execution.
Sorry, I should have just let you talk a little bit more.
Cool. And it's I like the term Bones for Time.
Yeah.
What a monster. He said, there are other buried remains in Colorado, he admitted, but he refused to elaborate.
Mm-hmm.
This new strategy was immediately dubbed Ted's Bone for Time scheme,
Gross.
and it served only to deepen the resolve of authorities to see Bundy executed on schedule and yielded very few new details.
Mm-hmm.
In cases where he did give details, nothing of substance was ever found regarding the case. Carol Ann Boone, who had championed Bundy's innocence throughout all of his trials and during most of his incarceration, felt deeply betrayed by his admission that he was in fact guilty.
Great.
She immediately moved back to Washington with her daughter and Ted's daughter, and refused to accept his phone call on the morning of his execution.
Stupid.
Ted's turn to get burned a little bit. She was also understandably hurt by Ted's new relationship with young Florida lawyer and Bundy fangirl Diana Wiener.
Oh, she is a wiener.
What a wiener, indeed.
Stupid.
Yeah. I don't get it either. He's not that attractive. He's average. He's upper average at best. Anyway.
Yeah, especially after you find out everything that he's done. He instantly is hideous.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, the authorities weren't falling for it. They were just no, we're good. When it became clear that his Bones for Time plan wasn't going to work, Bundy supporters began lobbying for executive clemency. New beau Diana Wiener asked the families of several Colorado and Utah victims to petition Florida Governor Bob Martinez for a postponement to give Bundy time to reveal more information. All of them, every single person that she went to, refused.
Thank God.
The families
Good for them.
already believed that the victims were dead and Ted had killed them. They didn't need his confession. Martinez made it clear that he would not agree to further delays in the case. We are not going to have the system manipulated, he told reporters. For him to be negotiating for his life over the bodies of victims is despicable. And you know what? Good for those families.
Seriously.
You don't get to live longer because you're holding our daughter's body over us.
Our family's already dead, and you're already getting what you deserve.
Yeah. Why do
good
we
for
need
them.
To know details?
That would be a hard decision, but good for them.
Alright, so Ted has one little last charade.
I hate this so much.
He's grasping at straws here. But there are plenty of people willing to just take him at his word.
I want to say, before you tell it what it is, I just want to say that one of my cousins, who is against the thing we're about to talk about, actually cited this as an example, saying, "Oh, didn't Ted Bundy say that hurt him though?"
Noted authority, Ted Bundy.
Believed him, and that added to my whole
totally
I know, and it's ridiculous. What is it, Jack? What is it?
Okay, let's get into it. On the afternoon before he was executed, Bundy granted an interview to James Dobson, a psychologist and founder of the Christian evangelical organization Focus on the Family. Focus on the Family is still around today, by the way. They're trying to push back LGBT rights wherever they can.
Yeah.
And they're
famously family focused.
Yeah, famously fucked up is what they are.
Yeah.
They're horrible monsters, and I wish them all the worst. So, Ted used this opportunity to make new claims about violence in the media and the pornographic roots of his crimes. Violence in the media, he said, particularly sexualized violence, sent boys down the road to being Ted Bundys. You are going to kill me, he said, and that will protect society from me. But there are many, many more people who are addicted to pornography, and you are doing nothing about that.
So stupid.
While James Dobson was apparently quite convinced that Bundy's concern was genuine, most biographers, researchers, and other observers have concluded that his sudden condemnation of pornography was a final manipulative effort to shift blame.
I mean, I know we were just saying, like, yeah, trust a serial killer, but didn't even, Jeffrey Dahmer say, yeah, Ted's a lying piece of shit. He's just trying to make stuff up.
Absolutely.
But I hate that so much. Yes, sexual content being exposed to people at a young age before they are mature enough to understand it. And like he said, particularly violent sexual content is not okay. But to just say, oh yeah, people are addicted to porn and that is a big deal and these people that are addicted to pornography are going to become like me, like, no. It's not porn's fault. It's your fault.
Yeah, that's exactly what Dahmer said. He said...
he's responsible for his actions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Ted Bundy himself says there are many, many more people who are addicted to pornography. So why don't we have many more Ted Bundys?
Yeah.
Because you're full of shit, Ted Bundy. Yeah. That's why.
And when you're mature and ready for that kind of stuff, there's no problem with porn.
No, absolutely not.
I could go on. There's problems with the porn industry.
Oh, for sure. Exploitation.
But just sex in general, like... People make such a big deal out of it.
But it's not going to turn you into a serial killer if you watch porn.
Nope.
Unless you're already boiling
There's so many other
serial
things.
Killer soup up.
Yep.
It doesn't do anything.
Yep. Porn responsibly.
Yeah, porn responsibly. That's all. That goes for the consumption and creation of porn.
Yes.
Porn responsibly.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Ted was just catering to Dobson's agenda as a longtime pornography critic and his potential for pull with the government. Blaming pornography is a pretty transparent move. If what Ted said was true, there would be thousands of Ted Bundys in the world, and there simply are not. Thousands, millions, probably. No one else had Ted Bundy's serial killer soup of conditions and decisions to become the monster that he was. The person you can blame for Ted Bundy's crimes
is fucking Ted Bundy.
Exactly. Ted Bundy died in the electric chair at 7:16 a.m. Eastern Time on January 24th, 1989. He was 42 years old. At the time of his execution, hundreds of revelers sang, danced, and set off fireworks on a pasture across the street from the prison as the execution was carried out. Then they cheered loudly as the white hearse containing his corpse departed the prison. His body was cremated in Gainesville, and his ashes scattered at an undisclosed location in the Cascade Range of Washington State in accordance with his will.
Alrighty.
That's Ted Bundy.
Fuck him.
Fuck him real good. And you know what? Like, I would never go and, like, party about someone's execution.
I wouldn't
That's
either.
A little morose.
But I understand it.
Oh, I'm not going to tell them not to do it. I just wouldn't do it myself.
That's how I feel too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I'm actually against the death penalty as a rule.
Me too.
Because the death penalty is irreversible.
Yes.
And if you find out that someone did, if there is a miscarriage of justice, there is zero way to fix that.
Yep.
But not sad that Ted Bundy is no longer with us.
Nope.
He's a piece of shit and he deserved to die.
Yep.
So there's that.
There's that. There's season 2.
That's season 2 in the bag. We're considering what season 3 is going to look like, and we're
not exactly sure when that's going to be starting up, but we'll let you know.
We've got this whole pandemic thing going on.
Yeah, good luck with that, everybody. We also had an earthquake not too long ago,
yes,
so hopefully that doesn't happen anymore.
Maybe we'll have a natural disaster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Also, today's the last day of the April Curse. We've talked about that just a little bit. It's super great. You should look it up and look at all the fucked up stuff that has happened between April 15th and 20th, like every year in history.
Absolutely.
So, careful for the rest of the evening.
Yeah, be safe out there, guys. We love our listeners, and I'm Jack.
And I'm Valerie.
And this is Below the Salt.